My family chose to believe my sister's lie, cast me out and left me to rot. Now they beg me to rescue them from homelessness. So I let them lose it all. Can you imagine a world where your own family believes the absolute worst about you, based on a vicious lie, and casts you out into the streets? I lived that nightmare, and what happened next would change everything, not just for me, but for the people who betrayed me. This isn't just a story, it's a raw, painful journey about betrayal, survival, and finding your own truth when everyone else has abandoned you. Now, before I dive into the heart of it, you need to understand where I, a 28-year-old guy, was coming from. I grew up in what seemed like the perfect, stable, upper-middle-class life in the Chicago suburbs. My parents, they appeared to have it all together, at least on the surface. My dad was a sharp financial advisor downtown, pulling in a great living. My mom worked part-time as a realtor, but her real job was curating this flawless family image, joining every community group, making sure our Christmas cards looked like something out of a magazine. I was their biological son, the golden boy who somehow just did everything right. Straight A's without really trying, naturally athletic, always polite to adults. I wasn't perfect, don't get me wrong. As a teenager, I'd sneak beers with friends, maybe throw a loud party or two, but nothing that would ever truly jeopardize the polished reputation my mom worked so hard to maintain. Then, when I was 10, they adopted Lily. She was 3 at the time. My mom had always dreamed of having a daughter, and Lily, this tiny little thing with huge brown eyes, had everyone absolutely wrapped around her finger within minutes. And yeah, I'll admit, I was a total jerk to her at first. Suddenly, I wasn't the center of the universe anymore. Everything became about Lily's first day of preschool, her dance recital, her adorable new costume. Looking back, it was just typical sibling envy. But in that moment, I felt completely supplanted. As we got older, though, I really thought we had a solid sibling relationship. Nothing extraordinary, just normal. We'd fight, sure, but I was always looking out for her. I remember when she was in 2nd grade, some kid started yanking her hair and pushed her on the playground. I was in 9th grade then, and I walked her to elementary school the next day and had a very clear chat with that little punk. Nobody messed with her after that. I even taught her some basic self-defense, how to throw a proper punch if she absolutely had to. I was her big brother, you know? That's what you do. By my senior year of college, I was absolutely crushing it. I was captain of our Division II baseball team, with some serious possibilities for minor league baseball. I had a 3.85 GPA in business administration, a minor in finance. My friends, they were the kind of guys who would drop everything to help you move, or pick you up at 3 a.m. if your car broke down. I spent a lot of time in the gym, lifting seriously since high school. By college, I was in the best shape of my life, bench pressing 315 for reps, squatting 405, deadlifting 495. I had that V-taper everyone strives for, broad shoulders, a small waist, abs year-round. I'm not trying to sound pompous, just painting a picture of where I was in life. I dated a few girls seriously, but nothing ever really stuck. Honestly, my future was my main focus. My dad had connections at pretty much every investment firm in Chicago, and I was lined up for a management training program at one of the biggest right after graduation. My plan was simple. Graduate, maybe play a few more years of baseball if the opportunity came up, then launch a career in finance. Eventually, I'd meet the right girl, get married, have kids, live that American dream. That was the plan anyway. By then, Lily was 15, a sophomore in high school. She'd blossomed into this artistic, dramatic theater kid, always in some school play, overreacting to everything. But that's just how teenagers are, right? She had her own friends, her own life. When I came home from college on breaks, we'd grab dinner, catch up on typical sibling stuff. Or so I thought. Looking back, there were definitely signals I missed. Her subtle jealousy when Mom and Dad would brag about my baseball accomplishments, her tiny, barbed remarks about how easy I had it, her tendency to spin these intricate stories about school that couldn't possibly be true. But hindsight It's always 2020ths. Then it was a Tuesday in October, my senior year. I'd just finished an absolutely brutal baseball practice. Coach had worked us into the ground after we lost a weekend series to our rivals. My legs felt like jelly and my shoulder was aching from too many bullpen sessions. But it was that good kind of ache, the one that tells you you've pushed your body to its limits and it's answered. I took a quick shower, pulled on some sweats and a hoodie, and checked my phone on the way out to my F-150, the truck my parents had helped me get for my 20th birthday. My blood ran cold. 37 missed calls, 54 texts, messages from family and friends, phrases like, "You sick? How could you? You're dead." My heart started hammering against my ribs. My first thought was somebody died. Grandma or grandpa. I dialed my dad immediately. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded when he picked up. His voice, though, was icy, frigid, a tone I had never heard from him before. "Get your ass home now," he bit out. "Don't you dare go anywhere else." Then he hung up. I stood there in the parking lot, staring at my phone, utterly bewildered. I tried calling my mom. No answer. My best friend from high school, who still lived near my parents, he didn't answer either. It was like I had suddenly become radioactive, and everyone was avoiding me. I drove the 20 minutes home in a haze, my stomach in knots the entire time. NPR was on the radio, but I couldn't hear a word they were saying. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw my Uncle Mike's truck and several other cars I recognized. Uncle Mike, my dad's younger brother, was a construction contractor with a short fuse, and he'd never really warmed up to me. Before I could even get out, he charged at me from the front porch, wrenched open my truck door, grabbed my shirt, and slammed me against the side of the truck. "I'm going to kill you," he screamed, inches from my face. His spit hit me, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. His eyes were wild, unlike anything I'd ever seen. I could have easily broken free. Mike was 50 and out of shape. I was a 22-year-old athlete in my prime, but I was too stunned to react. My dad and my other uncle, Steve, had to pull him away from me. "Inside now," my dad said without even looking me in the eyes. I stumbled up the front steps and into the living room. It was packed. My mom was on the couch, her eyes red and swollen from sobbing. Both sets of grandparents were there, looking absolutely dismal. Aunts, uncles, even close family friends. And Lily, my sister, was curled up against Grandma, sobbing into her shoulder. When I walked in, the entire place went absolutely silent. Everyone stared at me with this mix of dread and pure disdain. My blood ran cold. "What the hell is going on?" I shouted, scanning the room desperately for any clue. My mom looked up, her face twisted with a fury and loathing I'd never, ever seen directed at me. "How could you?" she choked out. "Your own sister?" "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my mind racing. My dad stepped forward, his normally calm, collected financial consultant demeanor completely gone. He looked like he wanted to tear me apart with his bare hands. "Lily told us everything," he snarled, "about how you've been coming into her room at night for years." The accusation hit me like a freight train. I couldn't breathe. The room started spinning. "What? That's insane. I never touched her." Lily was sobbing even harder now, a gut-wrenching performance. "You said no one would believe me," she wailed. "You said you'd hurt me if I told. You said it was our secret." "That's—" I screamed, my amazement giving way to a white-hot rage. "I've never said that. I've never done anything to her. What the hell is going on?" Uncle Mike lunged at me again, only to be stopped by Dad and Uncle Steve. "My buddy's a cop," he bellowed. "You're going to prison, you piece of garbage. They're going to love you there." I tried to explain, to show them how ludicrous this all was, but it was like talking to a stone wall. Nobody was listening. Lily, emboldened, started remembering more facts, making up things that simply never happened. She claimed I first touched her when she was 10, when I was home from high school for Christmas break. She said it had happened countless times since then, and that I'd threatened to hurt her, Mom, and Dad if she ever told anyone. She lied about everything, but they were all nodding, comforting her, glaring at me. It felt surreal, like I'd slipped into some alternate reality where everything was upside down. Then Dad snapped. He had always been so controlled, never violent, but something in him just broke. He stepped right up to me and delivered a right hook that would make a heavyweight boxer proud. It caught me square in the jaw, and I fell, tasting blood where my teeth had sliced into my cheek. "Get your things and get out," he roared, standing over me, flexing his hand. "You're no son of mine." My mom had already packed some of my clothes into trash bags. They were sitting by the door. Dad grabbed my wallet and pulled out every card with his name on it, credit cards, health insurance. "Dad, please, this isn't true." I begged, blood dripping from my broken lip. "You've known me my whole life. You know I would never do something like this." He grabbed my shirt, hauled me to the door, and flung me down the front steps. I landed hard on my shoulder and felt something crack. It turned out to be a slight separation. The trash bags of clothing followed. Then my baseball gear. "If you ever come near this family again," he spat, "I'll kill you myself." Then he slammed the door. I sat there on the lawn, blood on my face, my shoulder screaming in pain, neighbors peeking through their windows at the commotion. My entire existence had just collapsed in less than an hour. That night, I sat in my truck in the baseball field parking lot, trying to process what the hell had just happened. I couldn't sleep. I just kept replaying the scenario over and over, trying to understand how Lily could do this, and how my parents could just believe her without a single question. By morning, my jaw was swollen and purple, and my shoulder hurt so much I could barely move my arm. I called a teammate, Ryan, and he let me crash on his couch for a week. His roommates weren't thrilled, but they tolerated me. I tried calling, texting, emailing everyone in my family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, people I'd known my whole life. No responses, except for one message from my dad. "Contact us again, and I'll file a restraining order. You are no longer alive for us." Ryan tried to help. "Dude, you need to go to the police," he said. "File a report about your dad hitting you. Get ahead of this thing." But I couldn't. Something inside me just refused to accept that this was actually happening. I kept expecting my folks to come to their senses, to see how absurd it all was. And honestly, I was terrified. What if Lily didn't back down? What if they believed her instead of me? How do you prove in the negative that you didn't do something? 2 weeks later, I got an email from the university. My tuition payment for the semester was late. My parents had canceled it. I went to the financial assistance office, tried to secure an emergency loan. But without a cosigner and with basically no credit history, I was screwed. I had to drop the majority of my classes to part-time status, so I could work full-time just to afford even that. Coach was understanding at first and let me stay on the team, but I missed so many practices because of my new job as security at a bar that I barely played. My grades plummeted. I went from the dean's list to barely passing. Friends started avoiding me because stories were flying. Someone in the family told someone who told someone else. You know how it goes. Nobody ever explicitly called me a predator to my face, but I saw how people looked at me, how conversations would stop when I entered a room, how girls would subtly shift away if I sat next to them in class. About 4 months later, my truck broke down. Engine block cracked. Thousands to repair. I couldn't afford it. I lost my delivery job, which I'd picked up on top of the bar security gig. Then I was evicted from the rundown apartment I shared with 2 other guys because I couldn't pay my share of the rent. I started sleeping in the baseball team's equipment shed. After Coach quietly gave me the code, I'd shower in the locker room, eating 1 meal a day at the cafeteria with the last of my meal plan. One night in February, it was below 0 outside, and Coach spotted me there. I was bundled in 3 hoodies, using my duffel bag as a cushion, wrapped in a sleeping bag. Instead of getting angry, he just sat down next to me on the floor. "Son," he said, his tone genuine and concerned, "what the hell happened to you?" I told him everything. The accusation, my parents' reaction, being cut off, losing my truck, the apartment. He was the first person to actually hear the entire story. When I finished, he didn't accuse me of lying. He didn't even say he believed me. He just nodded and sat in silence for a minute. "You can stay here until the end of the semester," he finally said. "After that, I'll help you figure something out." The next day, he brought me a space heater and a good air mattress. He started inviting me to dinner at his house once a week, and his wife would always pack me leftovers to take home. It wasn't much, but it was something. Someone cared. I finished the year with a 2.1 GPA, just barely avoiding academic probation. But I was done with baseball. The fire was completely out. Coach set me up with a summer job at a wilderness program for troubled kids in Colorado. I know, ironic, right? But it paid cash, gave me shelter in a staff cabin, and kept me fed. That fall, I didn't go back to school. I stayed at the wilderness program and became a full-time guide. I spent my days hiking mountains, teaching survival skills to wealthy kids whose parents had no idea what else to do with them. I rebuilt myself physically, carrying 50-pound loads up mountains, chopping wood, erecting shelters. It was all physically taxing. I gained 15 pounds of pure muscle in 6 months. But at night, I'd get blackout, drunk with the other guides. On days off, I experimented with anything I could get my hands on: cannabis, LSD, mushrooms, coke. I wasn't careful, I didn't care. I was just trying to numb myself to the agonizing reality that my former life was gone forever. After a guide died in a climbing mishap that I could have potentially prevented if I hadn't been nursing a killer hangover, the program director pulled me aside. "Jake," he said, "you're one of our best guides. When you're on, the kids respect you. You're a natural in the field. But you're a liability when you're like this. I can't have you responsible for kids' lives when you're self-destructing." I was fired the next day. I spent the next year living in my new beat-up car, a 1998 Honda Civic I'd bought for $1,200 cash. I worked whatever jobs I could find: bar bouncer, event security, day labor, construction. Any position where I could exploit my size and where no one asked too many questions about my past. I avoided women entirely. I avoided families. I would literally walk out of a restaurant if a child sat too close to my table. The worry of being falsely accused again was crippling. I had nightmares about being in prison, about other inmates finding out what I was in for. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart thumping so hard I truly believed I was having a heart attack. One night, I was working security at a college pub in Fort Collins. I recognized a guy from my old university who had played football while I was there. He recognized me, too. He started telling his friends all about who I was and what I was accused of doing. By the end, they were all looking at me, making comments loud enough for me to hear. "Predator. Sick. Someone should teach him a lesson." I tried to ignore it. I did my job. At 2 a.m., I escorted the remaining guests out and was walking to my car when I was jumped in the parking lot. It was the 3 guys from earlier. They'd been waiting. They called me a pedophile and a predator. They said they'd make sure I couldn't hurt anyone else. I fought back, landed some solid punches. Definitely broke one of the guys' noses, but it was 3-on-1, and they had the element of surprise. I ended up with 3 broken ribs, a cracked eye socket, a dislocated shoulder, and a concussion. The guy with the fractured nose must have freaked out because they rushed away when a car pulled into the parking lot. The driver called an ambulance. I spent 2 nights in the hospital and was released with nowhere to go, no health insurance, and a $17,000 medical bill I couldn't pay. The medications they offered me barely touched the pain. I couldn't work because of my injuries. I slept in my car in Walmart parking lots, taking sponge baths in gas station facilities when I could lift my arms. I decided I was finished. Just finished. It was raining in the middle of the night. I drove to an old bridge outside of town, one that was high enough for a leap. Parked my Civic, walked to the center, and climbed over the railing. My ribs screamed in pain with each movement. I'm not sure how long I stood there. Rain soaked me as I stared down at the black lake below. I had my phone in my hand. No texts, no phone calls. For 3 years, my family had maintained complete, utter silence. Nobody was coming to save me. Nobody cared if I lived or died. Bit cold for a swim, don't you think? The voice scared me so badly I nearly slipped. I gripped the railing with my good arm, anguish coursing through my fractured ribs. I turned to see an elderly man in his 70s standing there in a raincoat, holding a fishing rod. "Go away," I murmured, my voice trembling. "Can't do that, son," he said calmly, as if we were just having a regular chat on a beautiful day. "See, if I go away and you jump, that makes me responsible in a way. It's not your problem anymore. It became my problem when I saw you. That's how life works." He moved closer, not menacing, but steady. "My name's Frank, retired Marine Corps. Seen plenty of men at their breaking point. You want to tell me what's got you standing on the wrong side of this railing?" "You wouldn't understand," I choked out. "Try me." I'm not sure why, but I told him everything. The false accusation, getting thrown out, the hell of the previous 3 years. Maybe because I assumed I'd die soon anyway. Perhaps because he was a stranger who didn't immediately treat me like a monster. Maybe because something in his eyes reminded me of my grandfather, the only person in my family who might have believed me if he hadn't been suffering from dementia. When I finished, he simply nodded, just like my old coach had. Then he said something I will never forget. "Son, you've been carrying this alone long enough. Put down the weight for one night. Come have a hot meal, dry clothes, and we'll talk about it with clear heads tomorrow. Why would you help someone like me?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "You don't even know if I'm telling the truth." Frank's eyes were sharp, even in the dim light. Been reading men's faces for 50 years in combat and in peace. You're either telling the truth, or you're the best damn liar I've ever met. Either way, death is permanent. Food isn't. I could have ignored him. Could have jumped anyway. Sometimes I still wonder why I didn't. But something about his conviction, his incredible calm in the face of my storm, compelled me to climb back over that rail. Frank's home was small, but meticulously tidy. Everything was arranged with military precision. Books were perfectly aligned on shelves, shoes parallel to the entrance. He offered me dry clothes belonging to his son, who had died in Afghanistan 10 years prior. He made me take a hot shower while he cooked. That night, I fell asleep on Frank's couch. And I mean truly slept for the first time in what felt like years. The next morning, he made me breakfast. Eggs, bacon, and coffee so strong it could raise the dead. Then he offered me a job. He explained he owned a small security agency that provided executive protection, event security, and other specialized services to high-net-worth clients. "We need a young, robust guy who can follow orders and keep his lips shut," he said. "Why would you trust me with something like that?" I asked, completely bewildered. "You just met me. I was about to kill myself." Frank looked me dead in the eyes. Because a man pushed to the edge who chooses to step back has something worth living for, even if he doesn't know it yet. And because if you screw me over, I know exactly how to find you. For the next 6 months, I lived in Frank's guest room, working for his company. He was a hard ass. 5 a.m. workouts, tight regulations, no alcohol on work nights. He even made me go to the doctor for my injuries. He paid the bills himself, stating I'd repay him once I got back on my feet. But he was fair. They paid me generously. He taught me about finance, investing, how to dress and interact with clients, how to be professional again. He also insisted that I see a therapist, an old Vietnam vet pal of his who specialized in PTSD. I resisted at first, but Frank wouldn't take no for an answer. "You got your bell rung, son," he said. "Not just physically. Need to get your head straight if you're going to work for me." The therapy was incredibly helpful. Slowly, it taught me that what happened was not my fault, that I didn't deserve it, and that I wasn't irreparably damaged. After 6 months, I had saved enough money to buy my own place, a tiny apartment. Nothing fancy, just mine, clean and safe. I started taking business management courses at my community college, as well as some specialized security certificates. Frank began to resemble the father I had lost. He never pressured me to contact my family. He never advised that I try to clear my name. He simply said, "Some battles aren't worth fighting. Focus on the war. Build a life they can't take away from you." After a year of working for Frank, he assigned me to oversee security for his niece's art gallery opening. He said it was a favor for his sister, but I realized now he was playing matchmaker. Sophie was not what I expected. Frank had described her as smart as a whip and doesn't take crap from anyone, which was absolutely correct, but not the whole picture. She was attractive in an unusual way, tall and athletic, with bright green eyes that seemed to see right through you. Dark hair cut in an asymmetrical way that elegantly framed her features. Not conventionally attractive in that magazine cover style, but stunning in the sense that she commanded attention simply by being present. We didn't exactly hit it off right away. She assumed I was just some muscle-bound security guard with no brains. I assumed she was a stuck-up art snob. During the event, I overheard her explaining an abstract painting to a potential customer, then rolling her eyes when they left without buying. "Not everyone gets it," I said, not really intending to start a conversation. She looked me up and down, taking in my security suit. "And you do," she challenged. "Not really," I replied, "but I'm not pretending to either." She almost smiled, almost honesty, refreshing. Throughout the night, I noticed her observing me, not in a make sure the security guy isn't stealing anything manner, but with genuine interest. I was doing my job, scanning the room, checking the doors, keeping an eye on the more expensive pieces. Professional, alert, but inconspicuous. She approached me at the end of the night, just as I was finishing up and the last people were leaving. "So," she said, "Uncle Frank says you're more than just the muscle." "Your uncle talks too much," I responded. She laughed. It was a genuine, warm laugh, not the phony social chuckle I had heard all evening. "Actually, he barely talks at all, which is why when he does, people listen. He says you're going to school." "Business management," I said. "Yeah, plus some specialized security certifications." "Interesting combination. Tell me about it." We spoke until 2 a.m., about almost everything, except my past. She was intelligent, humorous, and challenging in all the right ways. She had traveled a lot, had strong beliefs on art, politics, and music, but she also truly listened to my point of view. When I eventually explained that I needed to leave because I had an early training session with a new customer, she handed me her card. "I have a security issue at my condo. Locks need upgrading. Maybe you could give me a consultation." It was a clear justification, a thin excuse. Yet I accepted it. That consultation evolved into dinner, then movie nights, and then weekends together. Sophie was unlike anyone I had ever dated. Fiercely independent, dedicated to her profession, but vulnerable in quiet moments. She had been hurt, too, but not in the same way. But pain recognizes pain. For months, I avoided discussing my family. When she asked, I made up hazy stories. I told her my parents had died in a car accident, that I was an only child. Sophie sensed I was hiding something, but she didn't press. But Frank insisted that I come clean. "That girl is falling for you," he said one day at work as we were organizing security for an upcoming event. "And you're falling for her. She deserves the truth before it goes any further." He was right. So, one evening over dinner at my apartment, I told her everything. The entire terrible story. I expected her to leave, to look at me differently, to suddenly suspect that Lily hadn't been lying after all. Instead, she just reached across the table, held my hand, and said, "Thank you for trusting me. I believe you." Except for Frank, no one else had ever said those 3 words to me. I broke down right there at the dinner table, sobbing like a child. She just hugged me and allowed me to express myself completely. 2 years after we met, I proposed. Did it right, down on one knee, in the same spot where we had our first real date, ring in hand, heart absolutely racing. Frank led her down the aisle because her own father had passed away years before. We bought a little home in a quiet neighborhood. We started creating a real life. I finished my degree and became a partner in Frank's firm. We expanded from local security to regional and ultimately national contracts, building a reputation for professionalism and confidentiality. Sophie's artistic career took off. Her work began appearing in major galleries, fetching high prices. We talked about starting a family. I was finally happy, finally at ease. The nightmares were less frequent. I could be near children without panicking. I even reconnected with a couple of old college friends who reached out after hearing pieces of the true story from common acquaintances. My past life felt distant, like it had happened to someone else. I still thought about my family. I wondered if they had ever doubted Lily's account, if they ever regretted what they did. But I had accepted that chapter as closed. I had a new family now, people who chose and supported me. That was sufficient, or so I thought. It was a random Tuesday in March. I was in my office, studying security protocols for an upcoming client event with a billionaire tech CEO who was visiting for a conference and needed discreet security. My assistant buzzed me on the intercom. "Sir, you have a call on line 1. Woman wouldn't give her name, but says it's a family emergency." My first thought was Sophie or Frank. "Put her through," I said, picking up the receiver. "Hello, this is Jake." Not my true name, a name Frank helped me adopt for my new life. Silence, then a sob. "Jake, it's Mom." My body became frigid. I hadn't heard her voice in 7 years. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to shout. Instead, I just said, "What do you want?" "Please don't hang up," she begged. "We need to talk to you. It's important." "We haven't spoken in 7 years." My voice sounded icy. Nothing could be that important. And then she said it, the words that stopped my world. Lily confessed. She lied about everything. She made it all up. 7 years. 7 years of suffering. Starting over from nothing. Years of dreams shattered. Panic attacks, therapy. All because of a lie. I knew it was a lie, of course I did. But hearing her acknowledge it, "Jake? Are you there?" I hung up. I walked out of the office. I told my assistant to cancel all my meetings and drove straight to Frank's house. After I told him, he just nodded and said, "What do you want to do?" "I don't know," I admitted, my voice hollow. "Yes, you do," he countered. "You just don't know if it's the right thing." He was correct. Part of me wanted to ignore them, keep them out of my life permanently. Another part, a desperate, yearning segment, required answers. I needed to hear the truth, spoken directly to my face. Sophie felt the same way when I told her that night. "You need closure," she explained. "But whatever you decide, I'm with you. And Jake, this doesn't change anything between us. I'm still here no matter what." For 2 weeks, I ignored the calls and texts that began to pour in from Mom, Dad, and even relatives who had cut me off years before. I talked it out with my therapist. Yes, I've still got one. Not embarrassed to confess it. Finally, I knew I had to confront them, but only on my terms. I texted my mother. A public place. Coffee shop on Main Street. Sunday, 2 p.m. Just you, Dad, and Lily. I'll have folks with me. Only one chance. Sunday came. Frank insisted on coming as backup. Sophie was by my side, holding my hand so tightly it almost ached. We arrived early. I took a table in the corner, so I could see all the entrances and exits, an old security habit that never goes away. My stomach was a knotted mess. Part of me still expected them not to appear, or that this was some sophisticated ruse. Sophie kept checking on me, her eyes filled with anxiety. "We can leave any time, okay? Just say the word." They came precisely at 2 o'clock. Mom seemed older than I remembered. Her hair was grayer than brown now, her face creased with worry. Dad had lost so much weight he appeared emaciated. His costly business suits were replaced with khakis and a worn-out button-down. Lily, now 22, looked so different from the teenager I recalled. Her face was slimmer. Her eyes were downcast. She completely lacked her usual theatrical flair. When Mom spotted me, her eyes welled up with tears, and she ran forward, arms wide for a hug. I took a deliberate step back, placing Sophie somewhat between us. "Sit." No one spoke for what seemed like minutes. Eventually, Dad cleared his throat. "Son, I'm not your son." I interrupted him, my voice flat. "You made that very clear 7 years ago. Now talk. Why am I here?" Mom began crying softly. Dad looked utterly broken. Lily was still staring at the floor. 3 months ago," Dad said, his voice tight. Lily called a family meeting. She said that she had lied about everything. I looked at Lily. "Look at me." Slowly, she raised her eyes, which were crimson from crying. "Why?" My voice didn't even sound like mine. She drew a hesitant breath. "I was jealous. You were the perfect son. Everyone adored you, the star athlete, the astute thinker. Mom and Dad gave you everything. I wanted them to love me more and pay attention to me. So," I said, my voice rising, "you accused me of something that could have landed me in prison, destroyed my whole life." The anger that I thought I had dealt with years ago came roaring back. "I didn't think it would go that far," she muttered, her eyes darting away. "I figured they'd just be furious with you and possibly ground you. But then everyone started asking questions, and I couldn't take it back. And then it just kept going. Everyone was so sweet to me, giving me things, making me feel special. I wasn't sure how to stop it." "And you too." I looked at my parents, my gaze burning into them. "You kicked me out without even listening to me, without proof." Dad attempted to explain. "We believed we were protecting her. She was our little girl. And I was your son." I slapped my hand on the table. An entire coffee shop fell silent. The people at neighboring tables tried not to stare, but they were all ears. "I wasn't even home for the 4th of July weekend she claimed," I said, my voice shaking. "I was at a baseball tournament in Denver, and there were pictures all over social media. Did you even check?" Mom placed her palm over her mouth, her eyes wide. Dad became absolutely pale. "Do you know what happened after you threw me out?" I continued, my voice breaking. "My truck broke down. I lost my apartment. I slept in the baseball equipment shed. I almost died from exposure, from being beaten up by people who heard your rumors. I stood on a bridge, ready to jump, because the family who was supposed to love me believed the worst without a single question." I took out my phone. I showed them images of myself with a black eye and a split lip from that bar brawl. Me appearing gaunt during my homeless period. My hospital documents from the beating. "I was your son." My voice cracked on the last word. Sophie squeezed my hand. Frank put his hand on my shoulder, grounding me. "We're very sorry," Mom whimpered, tears streaming down her face. "We made a terrible mistake. We want to make it right." "Make it right." I chuckled, but it wasn't funny. "How exactly do you plan to do that? Give me back 7 years of my life? Erase the nightmares? Undo the trauma of being homeless, of being beaten, of standing on that bridge ready to die?" Mom was sobbing nonstop now. Dad appeared to have aged 10 years within the last 5 minutes. "We want you to come home," Dad continued, his voice barely audible. "We want our family back together." "That is not going to happen," I stated firmly. "I already have a family." I looked at Sophie and Frank, people who actually stood by me. Lily eventually spoke up, her voice small. "There's something else you should know." She explained how, following her confession, everything had changed for them. My parents had cut her off financially, sold the BMW they had purchased for her 16th birthday. While I was sleeping in my truck, remember? She had to drop out of her pricey private university, and now worked in retail while attending night classes at a community college. Dad's business had deteriorated as a result of some bad investments, and they were forced to downsize from their large house to an apartment. Mom's social standing in town was completely damaged when word spread about Lily's deception. "We need your help, Jake," Mom acknowledged, finally appearing truly embarrassed. "Your father's business is struggling. We're going to lose the condo. Lily can't afford to continue school. We've had to sell almost everything." So there it was. They didn't want forgiveness. They wanted money. I began laughing. I couldn't help it. It was a cold, bitter sound. "Let me get this straight," I said, still chuckling. "You destroy my life. Disown me. Leave me homeless. And now that I've managed to build a successful life despite you, you want me to bail you out?" "We're family," Dad murmured softly. "No," I said, standing up. "We're not. You made your choice 7 years ago. Now you can live with it." "Please," Lily implored, fresh tears running down her cheeks. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but Mom and Dad shouldn't suffer for my mistake." "You're right," I said, looking at her directly. "They should suffer for their mistake." I looked at my parents. "I forgive Lily. She was a child who made a terrible choice. But you two were adults who should have protected both your children. Instead, you threw one away without a second thought." I placed money on the table for our coffees. As we were leaving, Mom grabbed my arm. "Please don't leave it like this. What can we do? What do you want from us?" I gazed at her for a long time, letting the weight of my words sink in. "I want you to remember how it feels to have everything taken away," I said, my voice low but clear. "To feel helpless, to have no one believe in you. Maybe then you'll understand what you did to me." Sophie, Frank, and I walked out. As we approached the car, Frank squeezed my shoulder. "Proud of you, son," he said. "That happened 2 years ago. I've learned, through mutual acquaintances, that my parents did lose their condominium. My dad currently works in a big box store. My mom cleans homes. Lily dropped out of school entirely and relocated to another state. Sometimes I consider reaching out. Sophie says that would be the final step in my healing, forgiveness. Not for their benefit, but for my own. Frank says it's my decision, and he'll support me either way. For the time being, my primary focus is on my own family. Sophie is pregnant with our first child. We are expanding the security firm into 3 more states, creating something real that cannot be taken away. I know some of you might be wondering about certain things, so just to clear the air. No, I didn't press charges against Lily for false claims. The statute of limitations in my state had expired. And no, I don't feel terrible about not supporting my parents financially. They made their bed. As for Lily, some of you might think I should help her because she was just a child. Maybe you're right, but she was 15, not 5 years old. Old enough to understand the gravity of what she was doing. And she let me suffer for 7 years before coming clean. That being said, I might contact her someday. Just not ready yet. And for those of you asking if my parents will meet their grandchild, will they be in the delivery room? Absolutely not. Will they ever babysit? Hell no. But maybe supervised visits, eventually, when I'm confident they won't poison my child against me with further falsehoods, and only if they've had significant therapy and truly accepted full responsibility for what they did. So, tell me, after hearing all of this, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to choose between forgiving and protecting yourself? I really want to hear your thoughts in the comments below.